Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Ink Terrax the Tamer, Part 6. I'm Anthony with Inkwise Studios, and in the last episode, we started to use some of the multi-liners that I use to ink Terrax's axe or halberd or whatever you'd like to call it. Basically, the straight sections of the piece, and also to do a little bit of cross-hatching over here. So we're just going to continue on, add some more details, and I think in this video I want to tackle this part, these speed lines. Since like the scene is Terrax rising up, like basically using his powers to rise, grab a section of earth and rise up to meet whatever challenge is coming his way. So it's a good chance to show my process for doing feathers. Because this is basically a feather to me. So that's how I'm going to render it. And I'm also going to probably grab these sections over here too. Also, real quick, I do want to show you the page that I'm working on that this image came from. It comes from this page. And I'm not quite done with this page, but this is the panel that I, exerted the image from, and it's nearly complete. So I will try to get it as close to this as I can. Of course, I'm working in a larger size, so it may not translate that well, or I may do some things differently. So we'll see how it goes. So we'll just continue on inking. Let me just adjust this camera. All right. So let me start with these feathers down here. And since these are like long feathering sections, I'm going to use my trusty 8408 number 3. And let me add some more Windex to my ink over here. Alright. Get some water on my brush. And let's get to feathering. So. Now these are always a challenge just because, a long feather is always somewhat of a challenge. So I'll just bring the camera in a little bit. And we'll just go slow. I've gotten at times conflicting advice from different creators, and I guess that when you get so many critiques, you start to notice that it's like on feathers I got conflicting advice. One creator told me to just go at it as fast as I can, just get it done, because eventually it will fall into place. So don't worry about precision at first. Just do it, and then just keep doing it until it starts to become really precise. So that's one side of it. And then another creator told me, no, you need to slow down and you need to actually take your time on it to get those precision lines. Because don't rush it, just do it. Don't just do it, actually. Slow down and take your time on them so they can be perfectly straight. And I've noticed that to a degree. You see that flashing? Sorry about that. I think it's like the lighting here is kind of affecting that. So let me just turn this away a little bit. Okay. And like I was saying, you'll kind of find that you get enough critiques, eventually stuff will start running together, because I notice every creator has kind of their prepared scripts when it comes to critiques, and it's not necessarily that they write stuff down, but they have stuff that they typically say based on what they would usually look for in their own art. So and you don't really get to the meat of what they're talking about until they maybe the middle of the conversation, where they start getting more specific with their advice. But what I've noticed is that after a while, you get so many critiques that some of them, a lot of them, you just start hearing the same things over and over and over again. Sometimes that's really good, and sometimes that's not so good. Just mainly because, if you're hearing the same things over and over, it's probably because there's something that you need to work on. There's that degree of muchness, I would say, just to borrow from Alice in Wonderland. You don't have enough of a muchness to work in comics. It's like that nebulous quality. And I guess it's not so nebulous. I'm just not describing it technically because I'm trying to focus. But that is like where you have a level of skill, and it's obvious that you can ink, but there's like a gap between your work and professional work. And there's no one thing that they can point to that they could say, see here, do this one thing, and then you'll be ready. It's usually when you get to that point, that plateau where it's like you feel like you've learned everything that you need to learn to work in comics. Not necessarily that you need everything that you need to learn, period, because you're always learning as a comic book artist. But it's like this weird plateau where it's just like you're producing quality enough work because you see inkers who are actually working in comics, and you go over their pages and you kind of feel like you're doing the same level of quality, but for some reason something about your portfolio is not jumping out. So at that point in time, it is, in my opinion, like a good thing to learn how to critique yourself and know when what things you need to improve on, to have a critical eye about your work. And these feathers are starting to come along nicely. So yeah, like you want to get to that point to where you can just point out your own mistakes, call yourself out on your own crap, and basically be very self-critical. Not too critical to the point to where you downplay your own work, and I think I even do that too much. There is a golden mean, a sweet spot where you can be confident enough about your work, but not so cocky to where you just think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. You got to reach that balance so you can portray enough confidence in your work that an editor would want to use you, because basically I find that when talking to editors, if their level of confidence in your work matches your level of confidence in your work, then that's going to increase your chances of actually getting, have them having a place for you and putting you on a book. Now, has that actually happened to me? No, not yet, but that is my theory. And I speculate that, obviously that comes down to your level of skill in inking. But, you can have the exact skill to ink a book, but if you're not confident in your work, their confidence is going to drop just talking to you in your work. And, basically, whatever, at that point, if you downplay yourself too much, whatever you say about yourself, they're going to believe you. Because you don't even sound consistent. Like if you say, yeah, well, I inked this part, but I didn't really like it. It sucked. And, I messed up and I got a cold and my mom stubbed her toe and, it just didn't turn out right. I was like, that's not the time that's not the person to talk to about that stuff. You can talk to your friends about how you messed up on this part, how this sucks, or maybe even your colleagues, um, other people who create comics. But to the editor, that's not who you need to talk about your mistakes to. You know, I've heard this said many times by a lot of different people, in a lot of different ways. The best way I think it was said was by a person who is, I don't know if you would call him like a former editor. I mean, he's still kind of an editor. Andy Schmidt, who's the proprietor of Comics Experience, of which I hope to take some classes with. If they ever offer some inking courses, I would definitely join those. I don't even care if I'm working at that point. But he said it the best way, and it was on a podcast for iFanboy, which a series which I highly recommend. But what he said is, basically when you show your portfolio to an editor or a pro, it's a job interview. Don't think of it as a portfolio review. Think of it as a job interview. If you go into a job interview for whatever job, you're not going to talk about, how you suck at certain portions of your job. You're not going to talk about how, if you, let's say, like I work in like an IT field, you're not going to talk about how you suck at networking or how you suck at setting up permissions, in Windows. You're not going to talk about that stuff. You're going to talk about what you can do. You're going to talk about your skills. You're going to talk about your accolades. You're going to put your best foot forward because you're trying to get a job. It's the same in comics. It doesn't matter that we're drawing pretty pictures. It's still the same principle that applies. You put your best foot forward. You you treat it you take it seriously because, these may be funny books, as some people may call them, but they make serious money, for the publishers at least. So, you have to take it seriously because obviously, if that editor is taking time out of his busy schedule to come to a convention or other place of business to review your portfolio when they could be doing a few other things that they would either like to do or be more rewarding to do, if they took all that time out to do that, you best believe that they're serious. So you need to be at least as serious about getting a job in comics as they are in taking time out where they could be on vacation with their families to look at your badly drawn X-Men portfolio. So that's just my opinion. And of course, Andy Schmidt didn't really say it like that because he did soften that a little bit. Speaking of softening, let me fix this feather right here. He did soften the blow a little bit, but basically, you always want to put your best foot forward. Treat it seriously. Treat it like a job interview. Treat it like you want the job. Prove to them just how you're the right guy for the job. And the only point where it deviates from a regular job interview is instead of talking a good game about it, your skills are right there on display for everyone to see. It's in your portfolio. I can go into a job interview for, let's say if I wanted to work for, I don't know, Coca-Cola. And they can look at my resume and they may even, call some contacts. But at that point, when I'm sitting in the interview, they are at the mercy of whatever story I would like to play up. I could be like the worst employee at my past jobs, but I will, most people would always say, well, I'm a team player, go-getter, self-starter, I try to complete my tasks on time, and I work well with others. But you're probably the laziest, most selfish, most complaining person at your last job. But of course, you're not going to tell them that. You're going to tell them all the things that you think that they want to hear. Well, like I said, that's where comics and mediums like comics, like when you do graphic design and you submit a portfolio for review, it's different because at that point you can't really sugarcoat your skills. You can't, if it's bad art, it's bad art. If it's not even just not necessarily bad, but if it's just not up to par with what they're looking for, it's just not up to par. All your skills are laid bare. And, the only way to get around that is to just outright copy somebody else's work, which, of course, you should know is bad and you should never do. But, it's like, you keep that in mind that, you take it seriously and, don't, just tying those two things together is like, you can't be too overconfident about your work because, if they're looking at your portfolio, they see exactly what kind of person you are and what kind of art that you do. So you can be confident without being cocky. And if you're being cocky, they could probably see through that pretty quickly. So this is something to keep in mind. Okay, so what I'm doing right now, just going over these sections in Terrax's platform here. And he seemed to indicate like a kind of this grooved texture right here in this section where his platform came loose from the ground. So I'll keep those lines instead of just filling black up to this point. I'll try to keep that texture because I like inking texture. I like adding all that texture in. So, let's see. So let's see. Let's add this part. And like I've said before, it's like, just by the nature of the brush, it does give like this wispy kind of look. That may not necessarily be the best for this stone texture. But since I use brush everywhere else, it does at least look somewhat consistent. Or at least it does right now while I'm inking it. I'll probably come back later and it's like, this looks terrible. So I usually do that. I'll usually like ink something that's like, yes, this looks wonderful. I'll come back and it's like the worst thing I've ever inked. And then I'll tear it up and do it again. So. My wife is in the background laughing at my corniness. She thinks I'm corny. That's okay. I don't care what she thinks. Well, I think I do. But she thinks I'm really corny. To that I say, I'll just be corny. That's how I do it. That's how I roll. So. So let me just finish up this section. And I hope to get a lot more done in this particular video. There's definitely been a progression from what I can see, but it's not much of one. Like, I look at those, a lot of videos that I would like to pattern some of these videos after, and I see that they're like maybe 15 minutes long, 20 minutes at the longest. It was like mine are running at like 30, like 25 and 30. So I suppose you can watch these videos while you're doing something else or while you're inking yourself, which would also be cool. But I try not to make them extra long, like an hour or so, because if they're that long, you know, you'll just be snoring by that point. So, you said what? You're snoring now? See, folks never get married. Nah, I'm kidding, but yeah. See, it's always good, you know, to be married, and then, you know, you think you're doing something really, really, really cool, and then your wife just kind of gives you that look and points out your corniness. So that's one of the reasons why I got married. And I'll be married for, I think, 4 years this December. Got married back in 2010. That was a crazy time. Sorry about that. Let me grab this section right here. Yeah, that was a crazy time. We were young and in love. We're still young. Still in love. So. Still. My wife doesn't agree. I agree. That ain't right. It's messed up. Well, I love my wife. I'll say it on camera. To all you YouTube viewers out there, I love my wife. I mean, without her, I couldn't be doing this, so how could I not love her? Okay. I'm going to add some more lines over here. And I think pretty soon I'm going to probably get another webcam because the quality on this webcam is not that good. Not as good as I want it to be. It's 720p, but I want at least like a 1080p camera. Just so you can see all the details. I know it's not as clear as it can be. So my goal right now is just to put out good videos, the best videos I can with what I have available. So just grabbing this section right here. See, that's why I like doing it freehand. I don't like using a French curve. Just kind of knock the camera around. Sorry. Steady that. Yeah, I like challenge yourself. You know, just basically doing it freehand because you don't always have time to just grab another tool. So. And plus, I just like, you know, I like having that skill. It's just a, you know, it's not necessarily a defining trait, I don't think. It's just a tool in my toolbox. An often used tool, but a tool nonetheless. Usually I just, you know, I like doctoring up the line anyways and making sure that it's as straight as possible and going back over it. And plus, like when I use you know, I can't really use a French curve for the brush. I suppose you can, but it's a little bit more difficult because the brush is kind of, you know, just the nature of the tool. It bends all over everywhere, so it'll be hard to get like a straight, consistent line. So why do that when I can just do it freehand and get it straight? But I haven't having to worry about a piece of plastic being in my way. Boom. 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 So, yeah, just like doing that. So I hope you guys have picked up on my dislike of French curves. You're going to be hearing a lot of that. I'm probably going to be hearing a lot of commentary on that, which is okay. And, I've had a lot of people tell me, that it's not as serious as I'm making it. And I agree. It's just kind of like, it's like my thing. I will never say that nobody should use French curves. You use what you want. You use the proverbial Snickers bar dipped in ink if that's what works for you. But just me personally. And typically what happens is certain tools that I don't use just usually come from like a point where I tried to use it and it messed up the image somehow because I either wasn't using it right or some other factor to where it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. And it's not even always that the picture was messed up. It's just, sometimes it doesn't turn out the way I want it to. So so let me grab this shoulder section. I think, let me see what else is there to ink on the figure. So I'll just grab like these lines here, and then this section right here. So I'll probably get a lot of comments on that, like my love-hate relationship with French curves. Like I said, just my hang up I deal with. Certainly not one I hear about a lot. I think Brian Bolin had the same thing. Like, I know Brian Bolin, he talks about how he never was able to use a nib. And it's crazy when you think about it, because you think about how crazy precise his lines are. If you don't know who Brian Bolin is, and you should, he did The Killing Joke, a Batman story back in the 80s. He also did a lot of covers for DC. But, when he was using traditional tools, he was just using brush and tech pen, and that's fantastic. Of course, he inks, I think, mostly digitally now. So, I mean, to a point, it's like, it's not as amazing anymore. Like, there's kind of like a flat quality to his work now. That's just me griping. No, that's not really a knock against the man. He's still great. But he had this, I guess it's a good problem to have. It's like, you can't use, nibs like most inkers, so you go on to be like one of the most precise inkers over their own work with one of the most imprecise tools. And I will say, though, that this brush that I use, the 8408 number 3, is more precise than most other brushes that I've used, just mainly because the difference, and I know I talk about 8408, 8404, is like, well, what does that even mean? Well, those, of course, those are not only two brands of, two products from Raphael, but they denote like the brush length from base to tip, and it's like the 8408 is longer than the 8404. So the benefit that you get from that over just a regular 8404 is the fact that for some reason, because the tip is a bit longer, you get more precise lines. Or at least that's what I've noticed. Maybe that's just me or how I hold my brush or what have you, some other factor that contributes to that. But I found that I get more precise lines, and I get more precise feathers from that because it's like a longer, smoother taper than the 8404 series. That is just a pleasing, a smooth transition. But like I said, that may just be me nitpicking. Use whatever you like. Alright, so let me just grab these sections here and try to mimic the pen a little bit. Just a little bit. Just because I don't feel like picking up the pen. And sometimes I'll do that. It's like, because I use brush so much, that's like the handy thing. Because it's like, with almost no other tool, can it be to where if you don't feel like picking up a different tool other than brush, if you've trained yourself enough, then you can try to mimic that tool. Like, I try to mimic nib all the time with my brush. It's not always possible, but I try to do it anyways. Like here, I tried to mimic some of the same lines that I would get from a nib. To varying levels of success. It may not be totally successful, but, Alright. So, this video is going to run a little bit long because I want to finish up the figure before I do another video. So, we just grab these on his arms, these hatched sections. And boom, boom, boom. And let me grab these. Like this right here. Right here. Right here. Right here. I wanted to kind of save these for last on the figure just because they're so delicate. Okay. So it's not exactly even, see? It's like, I hate that. I get a little OCD about my lines sometimes, which is a good and bad thing, I suppose. It's a good problem to have. Alright. So let me just try to run through this real quick. Boom. Boom. And I probably want to go this way. Some more ink on the brush. You see my lines are starting to break up a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, you probably can't, but it's starting to break up a little bit. It's kind of due to the type of paper that I'm using. And it's also kind of due to the fact that I've noticed that when I ink for long periods of time, my hands get a little sweaty, and the oil from my hands sticks to the paper. So with the type of ink that I use, it causes the ink to break up over those sections because it's like basically like oil and water. The water in the ink doesn't mix with the oil that's on the page for my hands, so you'll have, you know, sections that will look patchy, or the line will start to break up, and it'll look like I'm inking with a black colored pencil instead of a brush with ink. Okay. Alright, so I think that's all I'm going to do for this video. I'll probably finish up this section and a few other parts on his axe off screen and just come back. It's just inconsequential parts. I just don't want this video to run on way too long. I just want to kind of get on with it. So in the next video, I will start finish up like this section, and then I'll start filling blacks. So thanks for watching, and see you soon.